Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, Steve Paikin and John Michael McGrath bring you a special episode of On Polly in front of a live audience at the Isabel Bader Theatre in the University of Toronto. Then, from Canada's place in an unpredictable world to the cost of tariffs on your pocketbook, we'll bring you our week in review. That's ahead on the agenda.
Hey, partner.
Hello, sir.
A little sugar to start out with?
As always.
There we go. As always. Okay. We should mention here we are in front of a live audience. I think this is the first time we've ever done this in front of a live audience.
First one on TV.
Hey, there we go. All right. That's all right. We don't normally get applause for anything. We sometimes get boos from the crew who are with us, but we don't mind the odd heckle as long as it's witty. That's the main thing, as long as it's witty. What are you wearing today?
I'm wearing a Toronto streetcar on my shirt.
That is beautiful and vintage.
Yeah,
that is great.
When I first moved to Toronto, my dad and I, we lived on an apartment just south of College Street with no air conditioning, and so in the summers I would sleep with the window open and I would hear the college car rattling around just about a block away, and so it's always, the streetcars make me feel like home.
Oh, isn't that nice? Now, what do they used to call those, like PCC something or other?
Yeah, the acronym stands for something, but these are the very, very old streetcars, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and you.
You will not be surprised to learn that I'm wearing a different Premier today, and let me just stand up a bit so you can see who this is. This is John S. MacDonald. Now, I hasten to add it's not John A. MacDonald. He was the first Prime Minister of Canada. This is the first Premier of Ontario. But why am I wearing it today? It's a very odd anniversary. He was also the Premier of the province of Canada before Confederation. So 163 years ago this week, John S. MacDonald became the Premier of the province of Canada before Confederation. And he's got a statue on the front lawn of Queen's Park. So sometime, I know everybody thinks about Sir John A. Macdonald, and they're uncrating his statue on the south lawn at Queen's Park. So we may have more conversation about him in the days and weeks to come.
I would imagine.
But I got John S. MacDonald today. And never the twain shall meet. They were very different guys.
You've corrected tour guides at Queen's Park on this issue.
I have, actually. That's very true. I do. That happened one time. That's true. Now, can we do a couple of shout-outs here before we start?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Shout-out number one. Before I knew John Michael McGrath, I knew the original John McGrath, and he's sitting right there. John McGrath, your dad, is here today. How about a little applause for John McGrath? There we go. It just goes to show you, once upon a time I worked with the dad, and now I'm working with the kid. What does that say? I don't know what that says, but it says
Somebody made terrible choices in their lives, and I'm not sure who.
And I want to tell you one other story about somebody named Mari Isogai. I met Mari several years ago at the Monk School at U of T, where she was a student. She's half Japanese, half Manchurian. She came to Canada alone at the age of 15. She's now writing post-secondary education policies in the Ontario Ministry of Colleges and Universities. She's a big On Polly fan. Mari, stand up and take a bow. There you go. It's so nice to see you here today. That's great. As we say, domo arigato, Mari. That's all I got, Mari. Sorry. That's all I got. All right. You got anything else?
No, let's get to it.
Let's do it. Off to issue one. Well, it happened in 1957 and again in 1977, and now for just the third time ever in our history, the Sovereign has read the Government of Canada's speech from the throne. The first two times, of course, it was Queen Elizabeth II. This week, it was her son, King Charles III. JMM, give us some of the reasons why you think Prime Minister Mark Carney asked the King to take on this task.
Well, I think it's a way of symbolically and ceremonially reminding Americans that while we live next door and most of us speak the same language, we are not like them. There are lots of differences between our two countries. I imagine for Mark Carney, it was also kind of neat to have his first ever throne speech read by the Sovereign. Mark Carney, of course, has a pre-existing relationship with the King and with the previous monarch as well. It reminds people about the importance of the monarchy to Canada. I mean, people have wildly different opinions about the monarchy, of course, but it is just a fact that, the monarchy is a part of our Constitution. It is also a specific, maybe a tweak on the nose to the current U.S. president.
A tweak? Maybe a little more than a tweak?
A little more.
Yeah.
Because he seems to, if I could put it this way, like many Americans, he seems to have a thing about the monarchy, and he seems to be quite fond of Prince Charles, and so reminding him that, King Charles, my apologies, reminding him that whatever he thinks of King Charles is in our corner and not his, is a nice thing to accomplish. And then finally, I mean, it's still just a throne speech, right? It is a way to have the sovereign just reiterate the government's priorities. This is the work of a throne speech, is to say, like, hey, this is what the government's going to do with this new parliament.
Well, throne speeches, of course, are partially about optics, partially about theatrics, and partially about substance. You've handled the first part. How about the substance? So the king read out, I think it's fair to say, a laundry list of government policy commitments, almost all of them from the recent election, of course, and the Liberal campaign platform. I got to say, I kind of expected that they might throw in some fireworks, but they really did play it straight, right? It was very much a normal throne speech in that sense, but they did slip in some important themes, if I could put it that way, right? I talked about a renewed sense of national pride and hope for Canadians, wished that, of course, the important work of truth and reconciliation with Indigenous people would go forward. He also spoke about Canada's desire to retain its democracy, pluralism, rule of law, self-determination, and freedom as values. Can't imagine why he thought that was important to say. And then he spoke about Canada's changing relationship with its trade partners, of course alluding to our neighbours to the south. All the big important themes coming out of the mouth of the King of the United Kingdom and Canada, yes, particularly the part where he said, true north, still strong and free, yes, was very powerful stuff. I think almost all the commentators have basically said this was a very triumphant visit by the King, and it went over very well. I thought it was kind of funny to hear the King say, and my government will cut the HST on housing. Like that?
Yes. His Majesty the King, defender of the faith, sovereign of all his realms and territories, and also here's a tax credit.
Yeah. It did sound a little funny.
Yeah.
Now, would it be churlish of me to point out to you that you put out a video just before the King read the throne speech, and what was the title of this video that you put out?
I think the title is something like "The Throne Speech Doesn't Matter."
Well, that's not really capturing the spirit of the moment, is it, JMM? What are you all about here?
It is important to say that while the King, or in normal times the Governor General or the Lieutenant Governor, delivers the throne speech, it is written by the government, but Parliament has its own rights and privileges, and after the throne speech is delivered, the Prime Minister federally or the Premier provincially will stand up and they will introduce a bill that asserts a fundamental parliamentary right. And that's all I'm going to say about this, because if you want to learn the rest, you can watch that clip on YouTube.
Right. It's Nerds on Politics, right?
Nerds
That's
on
the feature.
Politics. The most recent one just went up, I guess, yesterday.
And you know what? What do you call that? The screen grab or whatever it is?
The thumbnail.
Thumbnail. The thumbnail is a picture of you with a scepter and a crown and a cape
and
on.
a very fetching cape, yes.
You look good in a crown, I gotta say. You look good in a crown.
I'm not looking for that promotion.
No, it's a bit above our pay grade, I'd say. And with that, we're off to issue 2. Donald Trump is trying to pass what he calls his big, beautiful bill through Congress, and Doug Ford has his own mega bill that he is trying to get through the legislature. It's called the Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act. Okay, let me take the leash off you and have you tell us what it's all about.
So we've talked about this bill a lot, and we are going to keep talking about it because it keeps making news. The most consequential part of this bill is the province's ability to create so-called special economic zones. These are areas of the province where the government could, in theory, make the project, a mine or a refinery or anything exempt from any provincial legislation. Obviously, the government very big on getting new mines opened and other industrial developments. They see this as a way of speeding up the process, but they have faced criticism, not surprisingly, from environmental activists, labor groups, and Indigenous people.
What are Indigenous groups hoping for from this bill?
Well, they want a guarantee that this will not be used to cut them out of consultation within areas like the Ring of Fire, which, of course, is in the far northwest of the province and is the traditional territory of multiple different First Nations. The province has wanted to develop the Ring of Fire for, more than a decade now. It has been slow going, but the Premier, has talked about wanting to drive a bulldozer himself to get the road built. Indigenous people not loving the sound of that, and they don't love the law to make that happen. So they want guarantees that their rights will be respected. They want clear amendments in the bill to be added to respect those rights.
Tell us about the Energy and Mines Minister, Stephen Lecce. What's his view on all this?
Right. So on Monday, Energy and Mines Minister Stephen Lecce said the bill would be amended. They have introduced two amendments. One sort of put a bit of an introductory text, a preface to the bill, a preamble. That's the text, the word I was looking for. The problem that critics saw with that is that, courts generally don't rely on a preamble when they're trying to decide whether a bill is constitutional or not. So then, as we are recording this earlier today, the government did introduce more amendments at committee. They are now making a clearer guarantee in the text that Indigenous rights would be respected and that none of these powers could be used in ways that would breach the traditional and constitutional rights of Indigenous people.
We will presumably have to hear back from Indigenous groups as to whether or not they find these changes satisfactory.
Yes, well, and also, this is literally still ongoing. The New Democrats at the legislature are filibustering the committee as we record this. So, sorry, we'll all have to figure out how this all ends later.
By the time people are watching this on Friday, who knows? It may be over. It may be still a work in progress, because I think the message we got from the NDP this afternoon was that they intend to filibuster till midnight tonight.
Yeah, and we're getting later into the legislative calendar. The government doesn't have that many more days to burn before they're all supposed to go on a summer break. So, the clock is ticking for the government.
Now, as we suggested, it's kind of this province's version of the big, beautiful bill, so it does a bunch of other things as well, such as?
Right. So, the bill replaces the Endangered Species Act with the Species Conservation Act. You can probably guess that the bill does some things that environmentalists are not happy with. They say it will harm protections for endangered species, and particularly it narrows down the criteria for what kind of habitats will be protected. The government's goal is to cut the approval time for new mines from 4 years to 2 years. It also makes changes to the Ontario Heritage Act, allowing Cabinet to exempt certain properties from archaeological assessments. Right now, if you dig a hole anywhere in Ontario, it is possible that you could find, for example, artifacts of Indigenous history, and that requires all of the work to stop and an archaeological assessment to be done. I imagine that they're not going to curtail that dramatically, but these are the kinds of things that they're looking at revising.
Now, we are in a majority government situation here.
Yes.
Now, majority governments, you know the expression, they get elected with 43% of the votes, but they have 100% of the power. That is not to say that the opposition is completely powerless or without influence in this circumstance. What can they do if they decide at the end of the day they still don't like this? Well,
so we've mentioned the NDP are filibustering the committee right now. They can burn time, but they can't necessarily thwart the government in terms of preventing the bill from being passed. They are also trying to force some embarrassing votes at the committee by forcing the government to vote on things like whether it would protect labor rights or whether it would protect Indigenous rights. We've already seen the government back down a little bit on the Indigenous question. The NDP are also trying to force the government to say that they would not use the Bill 5 powers on things like labor rights. But there's a broader form of opposition here. Opposition happens outside of Queen's Park too. And people have raised the issue of blockades. We've talked about the Ring of Fire, right? It's taken us, more than a decade to not build a single road up to the Ring of Fire. If this government gets its wish and we build that road up to the Ring of Fire, we still only have one road. And all it takes to blockade that one road is a guy with a truck and a rifle and, some chutzpah. right?
Did you just use a Yiddish word?
Yes, my apologies.
No apologies necessary. I just never thought I'd live that long. Okay, and with that, we're off to issue 3. The Ontario Liberals and the Ontario Greens are joining forces to co-sponsor a private member's bill to tackle homelessness in the province of Ontario. Etobicoke Lakeshore MPP Lee Fairclough of the Liberals and Kitchener Centre MPP Aisling Clancy of the Greens say their bill would look to end homelessness in the province within 10 years. This is, I have to say, I'm trying to think back the last time this happened. Nothing is coming to mind. It's highly unusual for two opposition parties who are normally in competition with each other to co-sponsor a private member's bill, right?
Yeah, you will sometimes see like 3 New Democrats will co-sponsor a bill, but it's still 3 New Democratic co-sponsors, that kind of thing. I can't think of the last time I saw a bill with this kind of a partisan alignment, if I can put it that way. But this is Bill 28, the Homelessness Ends with Housing Act. The legislation would require the government to design a homelessness strategy to eliminate homelessness in Ontario within 10 years. They would do this by collecting data, preparing reports on homelessness in the province, ensure housing targets include affordable housing units, invest in supportive housing, and increase portable housing supports by increasing funding to the Canada-Ontario Housing Benefits Program. It would also create a homelessness advisory committee that would include members of advocacy groups, people who have experienced homelessness, police, paramedics, and other interested parties. The private member's bill, we have to say, also stands in rather stark contrast to the government's Bill 6, the Safer Municipalities Act. This is a bill that the government first introduced before the election. They have now reintroduced it, and this is the bill that would provide police with more power to expel people who are living in public spaces and give them power to arrest people using illegal drugs in those same public spaces.
You can't say that private members' bills never become law, but in a majority government situation, the odds are not great. So, I mean, it does raise the question: why bother if, at the end of the day, you're probably not going to get this thing passed into law anyway? So why do it?
Well, you know, one point about it is nice to see people working across party lines. Although, I mean, the Liberals and the Greens are not that acrimonious with each other, but it is nice to see them working together nonetheless. Our producer, Matthew, spoke with Aisling Clancy earlier today. She told him that working across party lines was something she had campaigned on. She's co-sponsored bills with other parties before. She also has been trying to get coffee with all of the new MPPs, and Lee Fairclough happened to be the president of a hospital in Kitchener, so there was a confluence of interests here. She also hopes that the government might steal a few ideas from the bill and incorporate it into an amendment or some future legislation. She said the solution to homelessness is housing, and that this bill would help make that happen.
Bill Davis, checkbox, right? Because I always have to mention him in a Bill Davis used to do that all the time. He'd see what private members' bills were out there. He'd take the ideas he liked. He would never pass those bills. He took the ideas, had a government put a bill forward, pass the bill, take his ideas from the other side, take the credit for himself.
Maybe go shake the other MPP's hand once or twice.
Might have shaken their hand, but that was it. And of course, that seemed to be the ticket for 4 straight election wins. So you can't argue with whether or not it was successful.
Yes, you don't always get the handshake or the spotlight, but that's politics.
That it is. Okay, and with that, we're off to your column, my column. Time now for our regular feature. We call it Your Column, My Column, in which JMM and I talk about the columns that we wrote this week for the TVO website, tvo.org. What you got up your sleeve today?
Earlier this week, I spoke with Flavio Volpe, who is the president of the Auto Parts Manufacturers Association of Canada, and he is trying to pitch the federal government on, this is really sexy stuff, a feasibility study. But it is a feasibility study about whether Canada can support a truly domestic automaker, right? Obviously, we have Ford and GM and Honda, but his point, and I don't think it's unreasonable, is that these are all companies where ultimately the decision are made in other countries. And, we can see right now American automakers are under intense pressure trying to balance the very real assets that they have here in Canada versus the incredible pressure they are under from the current U.S. president. And so Flavio says, that now is the perfect time for us to talk about a Canadian automaker The APMA has been doing work for years to show a proof of concept that there's the ability, at least, to make a fully Canadian-made car with the existing supply chain we have here. They call it Aero 2.0. What's missing is the sort of the financial oomph. We're talking about like $1 billion investment, and none of the companies in Canada who are not already automakers have the kind of money it would take to make this happen. So, at the moment, the feasibility study would be cheap. Actually, making this thing happen would be substantially much more expensive. Flavio is a very energetic, very successful advocate for his industry.
Truly.
I guess I wish him well on this one, but it's going to be a very big rock to move.
There's a father-son theme emerging here. Just as we introduced your father, who's in the audience here today, I remember when Flavio Volpe's dad was a member of Parliament, Joe Volpe, Eglinton Lawrence, I think, was his riding. And I'm old enough to remember when he was described as a young Turk on the political scene. So that does go back a little ways. Now, okay, can I tell you what I wrote about?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to anyway. Where do I start on this? The U.S. ambassador to Canada is a guy by the name of Pete Hoekstra. And he said something the other day which I thought seemed like pretty good news. He said the president has moved on. He's not going to be doing any more of this trolling about Canada being the 51st state. There's obviously no interest in Canada being the 51st state, so we're moving on. And I thought, well, isn't that special? That's just wonderful. Okay. This is, of course, 3 weeks after Donald Trump sat beside the new Prime Minister of Canada in the Oval Office, surrounded by gold, and said to Mark Carney, we still think you'd be great as our 51st state. And of course, it was left to the Prime Minister to remind him that he had just had a grand consultation with the owners of this property and they're not interested in selling. So I guess, according to the ambassador, everybody's moved on and we're not going to see any kind of trolling about us being the 51st state anymore.
And then,
thank you for the plug there, and then a few days ago, the president on Truth Social said, we're going to go build a beautiful golden dome, this defense system. And it's going to cost Canada $61 billion to participate in this golden dome. Unless, of course, you become our 51st state, and then it will be absolutely free. And he finished the tweet, or whatever you call it on Truth Social, by saying, and Canada is considering this, exclamation mark. So, Ambassador Hoekstra, meet me on camera 3 if you would. You claimed that Donald Trump would not bring up this nonsense again, and yet that promise lasted a whole 2 days. Good Lord.
I mean, who could have predicted that Donald Trump would make you look foolish if you tried to sane wash him?
It's so out of character for him. I just don't understand it. Yeah, I don't understand it. Anyway, here we go again. It's his favorite thing.
All right. Let us now go to a live edition of the On Poly mailbag.
Oh, this is cool. Now, you know, usually we take emails from people at onpolitics@tvo.org.
Yes.
But that seems kind of unnecessary to do when we have a whole audience here of people who may want to ask questions live and in living color. So, we got about 10 or 15 minutes before we get kicked out of here. Is there anybody out there who'd like to ask a question? Oh, I see David Harrison walking to the back already. Well, David Harrison, I got to tell you, is a guy who emails me, and I'm grateful for it, almost every week. He is a big fan of the On Poly podcast, and the reason he's so good to have out there is because invariably I will say something stupid during the course of the podcast, and he will email me to say, you said something stupid during the On Poly podcast. And then he'll correct me and I'll check it, and invariably he will be right, which is very annoying.
It's annoying when they're always right.
And he's always right. Okay, let's see. We got a microphone there, that's great. If you wouldn't mind, just give us your first name and where you're from and then fire away.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kathleen. I'm from Collingwood, Ontario. I grew up in Stayner, actually, near Collingwood, and I met Bill Davis when I was a child. He was opening a nursing home, so I've been a big fan of his always, and I do have an agenda, and pun is intended, Steve. I was watching the opening of Parliament, and I was wondering if you could speak to what is responsible government. I came with my sign. I was protesting at Queen's Park, and my concern is Bill 5 will bring us Well 5, and I'm sure you know my reference. Well 5 is Walkerton. What is responsible government?
Well, let's start by saying congratulations for being an active, engaged citizen. We do like that in the province of Ontario. Yes. Second thing we might say here is that just for younger people who were not around at the time, and I think we're going back 25 or 30 years right now, the Walkerton reference is obviously to the community, I guess, northwest of us right now, where thousands of people got sick and some people died as a result of drinking tainted water because, well, it was a whole complicated set of reasons, all of which were dealt with at a public inquiry which took place as a result of that. It was a mix of government policy. It was a mix of people who were running the Public Utilities Commission showing up drunk on the job and not doing their job and falsifying records. It was a big mess. But Walkerton has gone down in history now as the sort of cautionary tale where if you don't have your ducks in line, terrible things can happen. Now, having said that, the issue of responsible government, do we have it in the province today?
Well, I think that people tend to forget how many times the Ford government has backed off on some of its controversial ideas. I mean, most obviously the Greenbelt. It took a while. It took them a year. They did eventually back down. And so if you are opposed to Bill 5, and there are certainly parts of it that I think a reasonable person could be skeptical, if not alarmed by, if you are opposed to it, look at what is already happening just this week, right? They are facing intense pressure on this bill, not just over environmental concerns, though the Premier, I think, has sort of derisively referred to like environmental extremists, right? But Indigenous concerns and labor concerns. And, they have tried this kind of idea before, even going back to their first mandate, their first year in government, where they had Bill 66. They backed off on that. So I can't guarantee success, of course, but I would say that if the opposition to this bill continues, I would certainly imagine it's certainly possible to see them weaken the bill and amend it further.
Gotcha. Next question, please.
My name is David Harrison, and you, sirs, are never stupid, ever.
But occasionally wrong, right, David?
Well, that's true. You give us civic lessons every week, and you did it again today. Here's something that's crept across the border. The head of government sitting at a desk, signing an order and pretending that actually makes something happen. The Prime Minister's done it twice. Tax cut and cutting the carbon tax. What do you make of it?
Okay, actually, the cutting of the carbon tax was actually a legitimate use of that because that law had been written in such a way as to give the cabinet the power to change the level of taxation.
And he didn't abolish the carbon tax; he just reduced it to zero.
Yeah,
so he was entitled to do that.
The law said that the minister responsible could set the level of the tax in dollars. They decided that the appropriate level was now $0, and they will, I'm sure, eventually get around to repealing that legislation entirely, but that at least was defensible. But I do agree with you that this optic that we are adopting of having the Prime Minister sign, it's like the Trumpian thing of signing executive orders, and I don't love it. I wish they would stop.
Two more things for David. Number one, happy birthday. His birthday today, David, enjoy the last gasps of your 50s.
Thank you.
And second, you keep keeping us on our toes, okay? We thank you very much for that. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Katrina. I live in Toronto, but I was originally from Windsor. I'm born and raised in Windsor. It is also Canada's auto capital. And what is your opinion on how to support Windsor's auto industry against Trump's threats of tariffs, especially with Ford's bill to increase economies around Ontario, and also the feasibility study, and also taking into account other stakeholders like environmental groups and Indigenous groups?
That is a big question, Katrina,
Sorry.
and I can assure you that people at the highest levels of both the province at Queen's Park and the federal government on Parliament Hill are exercised with this because we as citizens in Ontario and Canada have spent multiple billions of dollars trying to protect what the governments in their wisdom believe are crucially important industries for the future of the province of Ontario. They want us to be the e-vehicle capital of the world. And as a result, we have spent multiple billions of dollars trying to prop up those industries. They would call them investments, subsidies, whatever you want to call them. She's asked a great question. What do we think?
Well, and I would add that we've also slapped tariffs on Chinese vehicles, and those tariffs have now gotten Chinese counter tariffs on agricultural products, among other things. And so when I spoke with Flavio Volpe about this, he mentioned, the fact that the auto sector has to defend itself, not just to sort of taxpayers in the general sense, but like auto advocates need to be able to say to the canola farmer in Saskatchewan why he's going through a real world of economic hurt right now, with a lot of uncertainty about where he's going to be able to sell his crop. And it is just true that at the moment, like, the EV industry kind of barely exists in Ontario, and we obviously hope those billion-dollar investments will pay off, but they're not here yet. And the guy in Saskatchewan with bushels of unsold canola is, and he's wondering what he's going to do. One point I would make is that this is not entirely a novel problem. There aren't that many novel problems left in the world. But, I think of in the 70s when the rail companies all got out of passenger rail, and that's when we created VIA, and we created Bill Davis created the GO trains, right?
Actually, you know what? That was Robarts.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
My point, nevertheless, is that this might be one way that you get to that idea of a Canadian automaker, is as a way of sort of rescuing and reorganizing the sector if things really go south. And for one of the major automakers says, like, no, we're pulling up stakes and we're shutting down our assembly plants here. You asked also about broader consultations. I mean, we have a problem in this country of lots of disparate interests. Alberta just doesn't, frankly, I will say, the conservative politics and politicians of Alberta just don't really see what the fuss about EVs is all about, and would be quite happy to keep selling oil until Judgment Day. So I don't know how I don't know if there's any way to solve that amicably. Sometimes in politics, one side just wins the argument and the other one goes home.
Yes, please. Next.
Thank you, Steve, for bringing up that passenger rail point, because that's a question I'm about to ask mostly JMM about this, because I did see his tweet earlier. So my name's Ben Horalula. I'm from Toronto, first off. So I've noticed that many notable urbanists in Toronto are saddened by the decision by Metrolinx to cut the contract that we made with On Express. Yeah. So to JMM, and also Steve, if you have an opinion on this, will this closure bring the dream of European frequent and electric regional rail to Ontario to a close? And if I may have one request, can TVO bring back political blind date transit for us? Thank you.
Well, okay, the Vice President of Programming, let's handle the second thing first. The Vice President in charge of programming is John Ferry. He's sitting right there. We got a request for political blind date transit edition to come back. What's this? What do you think, boss? Can we do anything about that? He's looking into it right now. You're making it happen already. JMM.
So just to give people some context here, this started, under the Wynne government in 2014. They started making really big investments in GO Transit and GO Rail. The idea being to bring much higher frequency to the trains on the GO network, electrify them. The idea would be that you wouldn't need to look at a schedule anymore to get on the GO train. You could just show up at the station. A train would be there in a few minutes, and it would get you there much faster because it would be electric. And it has been just kind of a nightmare in terms of actually implementation. It has dragged on. Some of that was just a political consequence of the Tories winning the 2018 election. And of course, the first thing that happens when a new government wins is they want to re-examine everything and rename things that the old government was doing. And so everything sort of slowed down. And there were lots of reasons why it has taken forever. And now the most recent news is that Metrolinx had issued the contract to a company that was, the partnership involved Deutsche Bahn, German train operators. The Deutsche Bahn knows how to do exactly this kind of thing. And so we don't know where things are right now. Metrolinx, famously transparent and happy to be open to the public, Metrolinx is not answering a ton of questions about this right now. Ultimately, the argument for electrifying the GO train system makes too much sense for this to die, at least to die forever. It could be a zombie that comes back. They're going to have to do it. Whether they do it in the coming decade or the next one, like I'm not able to muster up a ton of optimism about how transit gets deployed in the GTA right now. Sorry to be bleak.
While you're on a roll, when is the Eglinton LRT opening?
Well, first of all, I want to be very clear. Like, I'm not responsible for that, but I believe we can actually expect that one, at least, fingers crossed that nothing else goes wrong. But we're supposed to be able to expect that one to open in the summer, right?
They're not buying it. Nobody's buying it. I know.
Oh, God, hell, I'm not buying it. I'm sticking to my bike until that's been up and running for a few months.
Are you going to have bike lanes to ride that bike in?
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, please, next.
Hi, my name is Logan. I want to thank both of you for bringing such a spotlight to so many critical issues. I'm from Burlington, and my question is, what are your thoughts on our newly elected federal government headed by Mark Carney, their decision to pass up on putting forward a budget in the spring session, a major part of the government's responsibility? Is it simply because there is quote-unquote not enough time, or is the Prime Minister evading a major part of the responsibilities of his government?
Yes. Next question. No, look, I think we can say this much at the very least, and then, feel free to pile on after I'm done here. But there seems to be a little question that the current Prime Minister's economic bona fides were a huge reason why he won the last election. And he didn't win it by that much.
Yeah.
And the notion that he was sort of, you've heard this expression, the adult in the room,
yes,
who would be able not only to handle Donald Trump, but also completely reform and reimagine the Canadian economy, was obviously a huge part of his unique selling proposition. And when he announced, actually he and his finance minister were not quite on the same page on this right away. The finance minister said one thing, and then Mr. Carney came out right after that and said, actually November. We're going to have the budget in November. And not to have some kind of economic statement on the status of the books at this point, let's just say, it's a very courageous move if you're trying to convince the public that your hands are firmly on the tiller and that you intend to wrap your arms around this, $500 billion budget. So that's what I'll say on that. Over to you.
I would say there's a few things. One is that the government is still going to have to test the confidence of the House even without bringing a budget forward. The speech from the throne includes a response to the speech from the throne, and there's like a motion in the Commons that MPs will have to vote on. And in theory, the government could be defeated on that motion. I don't expect it to be, but the principle of testing the confidence of the House will still be there even if they don't present a budget. There was a thing, it was like, I think it was before the election even formally began, and one of the members of Canada's CEO class discovered that a thing called special warrants exists, which is that the government is allowed to spend money when the House isn't sitting. They can spend new money so long. There are rules about it, but basically it's allowed. It's a very, very old tradition. But this CEO thought it was deeply sinister and that Mark Carney was throwing out all the rules of constitutional government, and he was very, very wrong and looked stupid doing it. But the kernel of the truth here was that the fiscal cycle of the Government of Canada was being I don't want to use the word held hostage, but it was being distorted by the partisan interests of the Liberal Party, right? The current, well, I guess not even current anymore. The recent crisis in the Liberal Party started with the introduction of the Fall Economic Statement.
Yes.
The House was, or the Parliament was prorogued. The Liberals had a leadership bid. Then we went into an election. All of this, and I'm not like angry about this. I'm not saying this as an accusation, but this was to the interest of the Liberal Party, and the fiscal cycle of the Government of Canada, which is also kind of an important thing, has kind of fallen by the wayside. The idea that there's not enough time, I don't know. I mean, when COVID hit, the province of Ontario was at least able to get an economic statement out when the Minister of Finance at the time acknowledged, like, we have no idea what is going on, but you all deserve to see the books. So they did that, and then we got a more comprehensive budget later that year in the fall. So I feel like there is something that they could put forward. It might not have actually been worth the paper, but I think the principle is important.
Gotcha. We have, they're going to throw us out of here soon, so we've got time for one last question, and sir, that's you.
Oh, thank you. Hi guys, I'm Theo from Toronto, and we've only had two non-liberal or conservative governments in this province, the United Farmers of Ontario and the Bob Rae government, which I believe Steve covered both election victories.
Correct.
Is there a blueprint for Merritt Stiles and for Mike Schreiner regarding the history of those two governments?
That is a very on-Poly question, isn't it?
Yes.
How did you know, first of all, that I was friends with Premier Ernest Drury back in 1919? That's what
Just a long shot.
Yeah, it was a guess, eh? Yeah, I guess. Look, we've had 44 elections in the province of Ontario over the last 158 years, and you're quite right. Every single one, save for two, the Farmers and Bob Rae in 1990 for the NDP, were won by either Liberal or Conservative governments. We have a penchant in this province for electing one of two parties almost all the time, and the circumstances, as history would suggest, have to be quite extraordinary before we're prepared to do something different. In 1919, if you can imagine this, the Farmers got elected as the government of Ontario, and they didn't even have a leader. The caucus, after winning, the Greens, or not Greens, the Farmers, the United Farmers of Ontario, after winning, caucused, and they decided to pick Ernest Drury as their leader after they had already won the election, and that's why he became the premier. So pretty unusual things have to happen for one of those other parties to have a shot at this thing. Now, you have to guess at the moment, is there anything on the horizon that could potentially represent an extraordinary departure from the way we do politics here, as did happen in 1990, that would allow for either Mike Schreiner or Merritt Stiles to become the premier? And the answer is?
Well, I don't know, but
Neither do I.
I go back to, like 1919 was obviously the fallout from World War I. 1990 was a period of, it's easy to forget just how dramatically Ontario politics changed from 1985 to 1995 when Mike Harris won. Several elections, an enormous amount of turnover in the legislature. Obviously, the Tory dynasty ends, and then David Peterson comes in 87. He wins 85, and then he gets reelected in 87 with the largest majority ever. And then Rae comes in and sweeps that away, and just so much change. And so, I mean, one of the answers, or at least one possible answer, is just hope for chaos. And what's the line from Game of Thrones? Chaos is a ladder, right? But I suspect that if you asked Merritt Stiles, she would at least not on the record say, "Oh well, I'm hoping for chaos."
No, that is a good point. Thank you for all of you who asked questions here, and to those we didn't get around to. We still got that old-fashioned email address. You want to give it before we head out?
Right. The email address is onpolitics@tvo.org.
Now, JMM, I always do two things in every episode of the On Poly podcast. I mention the 18th Premier of Ontario, which I've done. And what's the other thing I always do?
We talk about Hamilton.
We got to mention Hamilton. So let me just say for the record, I'm very glad that the Mayor of Hamilton, Andrea Horwath, the former leader of the NDP, who was literally swept up by a huge gust of wind as she was taking the stairs at Hamilton City Hall and fell and needed surgery. She is recovering, and she is now only this week back to work, so we wish her well in her continued recovery. And now I've mentioned Hamilton.
Well, and I was in Hamilton this morning, and I had to motor across the GTA to get here for this event in time. And I took the 407, and I have not yet gotten the bill yet, so I don't understand why this highway so upsets people.
You were in Hamilton earlier today?
Yes.
I thought you had a particular glow about you. There we go. All right.
The sheen is...
There we go. Well, that is this special edition of the On Poly podcast for Friday, the 30th of May, 2025, from Victoria University at the U of T.
You can follow our show on Apple Podcasts so that you get notified each time a new episode is available, and you can see the video version of the podcast on the TVO Today YouTube channel.
We want to give special thanks to our fantastic crew for making this live podcast taping happen, and thank you to everybody who came out today to watch it happen. Wonderful to be here at Vic. And in the meantime, everybody, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Your job, I gather, is to go to work every day and to try to push that boulder for peace up the mountain just a little more, a little more, a little more. So let's start with a simple question. How's that going these days?
It's very tough right now. We're in a tough space in the world. The thing I think it's important for us as Canadians to remember is that however tough we think it is for us, it's a lot tougher for a great many other people around the world.
Can you compare and contrast? Because 40 years ago during the height of the Cold War, we had, tens of thousands of nuclear weapons at each other's heads, and yet for some reason, it felt safer then than it does today. Is that weird of me to think that?
No, I don't think it's, first of all, Steve, there's nothing weird about you. Whatever some people may say, I've never,
appreciate
it's not
that
an
vote of
adjective
confidence
I've ever used to describe you. There are others, but that's not one. I would say that there was an awesome stability in the nuclear era. And by the way, we're still living in the nuclear era. And the more countries that have the potential for becoming active in the nuclear field, the more unstable it will become. But because of the sense that the countries involved all had an understanding of what the rules would be and how things would work, and there were lots of conversations behind the scenes, and there were lots of discussions. We had a couple of major confrontations, such as in Cuba in 1962. But I think that the challenge now is that there are no guardrails. We're not living in a world where any rules are being followed. Humanitarian law is not being followed. International law is being abused every day in conflicts all around the world and in the conduct of a great many countries. And it is a much less stable time for most people outside a frame of countries that are relatively doing well economically compared to the rest. But for a great many people, the world is really tough. And I think we need to understand that as Canadians. The risk that I see is that we become, as a country, and we become as a world, too preoccupied with number one, too preoccupied with ourselves, and still not sufficiently thinking about what's happening out there. And the thing of my job, the most important part of my job, I think, is to twofold. One is to tell the world about what we think and what Canadians are about. But secondly is to tell Canadians and to tell our government what the rest of the world is about.
Adam, essentially, what do you like about the Therma plan?
Well, lots to like about it. First and foremost, Ontario Place is coming back online, all of it, not just the West Island where our facility will be placed. There's 56 acres of new parkland across the space, 16 acres on our particular island, including rooftop parks. But I think what I really like about it is Therma. Therma builds really phenomenal facilities that are accessible, they're inexpensive. There are premium services if you want them, but when Ontario Place closed, it charged about $32 to get in, extra if you wanted to go to the water park. That's roughly the price you'll pay to get to Therma. But more importantly, some of the biggest concerns I had was whether or not the waterfront parks would be lost behind an admission gate the way it was when it was originally opened. And one of the first things to come down were the admission gates. And so people trying to get to the water's edge, going for a swim or a stroll or walking a dog or kayaking, will have access to 56 acres of new parkland, over 4,000 trees, all on the water's edge, with more places to swim and facilities and maintain trails. It's a great project and a good way to move forward on Ontario Place.
Okay. And Elizabeth, what don't you like about the sound of that?
Quite a few things. First of all, I think that there are a number of things Adam has just said that I would disagree with. But in general, I don't like the cost of this project is enormous, and I'm not just talking about the billions of dollars the Auditor General has said that our tax dollars will go towards the project, but it's incredibly expensive. It's expensive in that The project has been shepherded through by our Ontario government to the point where they've passed their very own law to eliminate all scrutiny and accountability around the project. There are a number of unknown costs that we haven't even heard about. And thanks to this protection by the government, there's very little we actually know is being built. So there's the issue of it's expensive, it's dollars expensive. I think many folks across Ontario, even if they never visit, they're paying for it. The other thing is that I find it incredibly short-sighted. I've looked at waterfronts in great cities around the world. They tend to be open access, really visionary, and really planned, co-created with community, which this one is not, and also iconic. I think you were talking about the original vision for Ontario Place, and I think that one of the really exciting things about it back then is that it was built for Ontarians by Ontarians with this Ontario kind of heritage idea of what did it mean to be Ontarian. This project is, it's a kind of a cookie cutter attraction that's being plopped down on Ontario Place, and as far as I understand, the company hopes to build them across North America.
Okay, let's hold there. Adam, you've heard some of the criticisms. Come on back.
Well, I mean, I think that the notion of co-creation is important. It's one of the reasons we have a strong partnership with the Mississaugas of the Credit. The Indigenous footprint at Ontario Place was never pronounced, even by Bill Davis and the original architects. That's changing, and it's going to be revealed shortly as just how deep that partnership is, and it's a good thing. It's one of the things Ontario Place for All has called for, and we've built that partnership. I think the other side of it is that one of the more important things that Ontario Place has become since it was closed down is a park. The success of Trillium Park shows us that free access to the waterfront is a value that needs to be sustained. That's happening. It's with a massive new park down there, the size of Trinity Bellwoods.
Free access to the waterfront.
Yeah, I mean, they're replacing the gates, which have been open for years since the closing of Ontario Place, with an admission building that you'll have to walk around to get across.
That's actually not true. It's
well,
the
I would
access
love to see the actual plans that are coming forward.
But
That's
even
one
the
of
last iteration of the plan showed that there was access to the lake and the protected access that the community has called for. We've responded, and we've actually shrunk the size of the building and grown the size of the green space. But what's more important is that you won't have to pay an admission price like you used to have to get down to see the water, the sunset over the lake, or to go for a swim.
Is that a victory for your side?
It's really hard to take. I mean, I think the other thing Adam just said is the size of Trinity Bellwoods, and this one is really one that's been fascinating to me. Trinity Bellwoods is 36 acres. Yep. Currently, the plan that I've last seen is 16 acres of public space on the West Island. Right. That's right. If you want to put Trinity Bellwoods on the West Island, I would be thrilled.
It's when you quote the price of the Auditor General's report cites, it's for the redevelopment of all of Ontario Place. And while I'm not here to explain the provincial government's plan for the rest of it, but there's the Budweiser Theatre is being expanded to a year-round facility. That project, which the NDP opened in the 90s, is being built upon. The elimination of parking lots. There are 5 parking lots. Those parking lots are disappearing. And 56 acres of new open green space, a public park, will be built at the water's edge, free and accessible.
What kinds of things are going up in price at the grocery store?
Well, so Canada has put retaliatory tariffs on a lot of food items coming from the U.S. That's 25% on everything from dairy to meat and seafood and whatnot. So those are items where we have seen being impacted by tariffs. Now, the Canadian government has actually dropped a lot of the tariffs, specifically on food that is manufactured or packaged in Canada. So I think the biggest impact we will see is from perishables that are brought directly from the U.S. and not being repackaged and further processed here.
Mike, I am curious, it seems kind of hard to think about what it was like before January, but before all the tariff-related back and forth, what was the situation with grocery prices here in Canada?
Well, we've seen the grocery prices go up over the last 3 or 4 years for a variety of reasons. We know, we talk about extreme weather and the war in Ukraine and a lower Canadian dollar, and it adds up. We sort of had a perfect storm of impacts, if you will, that led to these price increases. So we'd seen some of those begin to moderate a little bit. We hadn't seen prices come down a lot, but the rate of increase had slowed dramatically. And before January, we were saying that food was actually lagging behind the general rate of inflation.
All right, so I'm curious, as Mike had mentioned, there's a number of factors that kind of go into the prices that we see. Can we identify which factors are driving prices up in particular? If we're talking about, climate disasters, if we're talking about war, are we able to kind of get behind those numbers?
Well, it really varies on a case-by-case basis. For example, if it's climate disasters, we know that it's going to be crops that are specifically impacted by those disasters, right? Wildfires, drought, extreme temperatures. If it's the war in Ukraine, it's going to be wheat, a lot of grains, like cooking oils. So it really depends. With tariffs, we do have a list of what is being impacted posted on the government website. So that is much easier to identify.
Is it possible to determine, though, how much tariffs play in a role when if we're talking about cents and dollars for sort of down the line to a consumer, how much that, a tariff will impact versus something like a climate disaster?
Well, that is a lot murkier to determine because, as you might know, the price of something is determined by not only the cost of production, but also the prices you have to pay to the workers, transportation costs, so gasoline price fluctuations also impact prices, and then the cost of storage, warehousing, to a number of other factors. So while we can see that, okay, there are certain drivers driving up prices of certain goods, how much of that ends up being in the price increase is much harder to determine.
That is the agenda for Friday, May 30th, 2025. Monday on the program, Steve Paikin and guests will explore how Canada can balance national unity with resurgent regionalism. I'm Jane Jaganathan. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and Steve, we'll see you again on Monday.
We are where you are. TVO's current affairs journalism is available across platforms across Ontario, on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and more. Catch The Agenda, The Thread, On Poly, and other podcasts, docs, and video series on the device of your choice when you choose.